Okay, I think we're live. It only took me 20 extra minutes to get set up with a lot of tech help. But hi, I'm Christine Wolf. Thank you all for joining us. This is first time doing a live stream, and I am joined by Steve and Sharon Fiffer, the editors of the newly released Story Stuff. Think about it as a book, a show and tell for grown-ups, and it is just out now. And Steve and Sharon, who've written so many books, that they are also my writing mentors. They're the most wonderful people. Could you both, in whatever order you'd like, introduce yourselves and just tell us a little bit about how you came to write Storied Stuff, and then we'll back up and find out more about your writing life beyond this book.
Go ahead, Sharon. Ladies first.
Thanks. Okay. How we came to write Storied Stuff?
Yeah,
How Storied Stuff came about?
Yeah.
During COVID, Steve and I wanted to have, we were having Zoom parties with our friends. And Steve decided one night that it would be very interesting if people just looked around their house, picked up an object that they had kept and treasured through the years, and told a story about it, explained it to the rest of the group, just to get us away from all the talk about, isn't this terrible?
Better than showing a wine glass every week. What they were drinking instead of something a little more
Exactly. So we did it, and it was incredibly successful. We learned things about our friends. We've known them for years and years. Steve has known some of them since kindergarten, and his best friend since kindergarten told a story that Steve didn't know and had never heard. And it just became, it was a thing for us that, it was very emotional for us that we could know people but not know them. And combine that with the fact that I had taught writing at Northwestern and at University of Illinois. And at both places, I had done nonfiction writing classes, memoir type classes, where all my assignments focused on an object. I would ask people to write about the kitchen table and then get family story from an object that they described, and it would be a way in. So with those two things combined, and we called it show and tell for grown-ups, Steve said, let's do it. And he's the idea person and the go-getter. So really, he did all the work on it. And we got our daughter and son-in-law to do the website. And we started putting the word out to get people to submit stories. And I said, let's do it for a year. Let's aim for a year, see if we can get a year of stories. And this is our 5th anniversary. We've done it for 5 years. And as I say, Steve does almost all the work. He does he sends out all the emails. He does all the, the pairing of the stories. And I just sit back, and every once in a while I write a piece for it. So for our 5th anniversary, our gift to each other was to do the book.
So can I, before Steve jumps in, thank you for that explanation, Sharon. I want to hear from Steve about how this website collected the stories, which were no more than 500 words each, with a photo of the item. And then how did you, what was the process of that website invites writers, whether they're published or not, just invites everybody to participate. And then would you edit the pieces? Would you just sort of put them up? How would you decide what goes up and when? And then how did you decide what pieces went into the book, Storied Stuff?
Right. Well, let's start with the second question. How do we decide what went into the book? Over the 5 years, we've published over 500 separate stories about objects. We do 2 a week on Wednesdays. In fact, yours was up last week.
Thank you.
And Sharon's is up this week.
Woohoo.
And it's longer than 500 words because I know the editor.
Yeah. She was able to break the rules by having a much longer one today. So we've had over 200 contributors, and we've got hundreds of thousands of views on STORIEDSTUFF.com, and it's storied-stuff.com. When we decided we wanted to do an anthology or collection, we realized that putting 200 essays, because we want to do one for each contributor, that we wanted them to celebrate this too. And as you've said, Christine, some of them had never been published before. So they were very excited. And we wanted everybody to be celebrated in this. And as Sharon, who did edit a literary magazine for years, has pointed out, this really isn't a literary magazine. We don't hold people to the standards that your traditional literary magazine. We do have standards, and we do edit slightly, but we don't edit as if we were sitting in New York and publishing some highbrow literary magazine. So we had this kind of dilemma with, okay, we've got 200 essays and pictures. That's going to be a 500-page book, and we can't do that. So that's why we decided to divide this into 2 volumes, one to publish right now in the spring and one later in the year. And we just, the only way we could really do it without spending much more of our time than we had was to just say, okay, in the first volume, it'll be contributors whose last names begin A through L, and then we'll organize the pieces within the book however we want. So A through L in this volume that you've got, M through Z, which you'll be in October or November.
And this is all published by Christmas Lake, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Just a fabulous, fabulous publisher.
You know, we went with a hybrid press, which Christmas Lake is, which is selective, but much more nimble than the New York or traditional presses, and certainly more nimble than smaller presses and university presses, which take forever to get your work, even if they accept it, out to the public. Over a year, maybe 18 months. And in this instance, we had everything in to Christmas Lake by the end of January, and here we are only 3 months later with a publication date of April 30th with very high quality.
That's incredible.
Photos and everything. So
right, with color photos and everything. I just got my copy yesterday, so I haven't had the pleasure of going through it yet, but I can't wait. Sorry to interrupt, but this whole, okay, sorry, you answered question 2 first.
Well, I think I answered 1 as well in terms of
the process.
But I did want to add that we also decided in celebration of this 5th year anniversary that we would donate all the proceeds to not-for-profits that help people who have been displaced from their own stuff. And when the book was going into production, the California wildfires were raging, so we decided to donate the proceeds to those impacted by the California wildfires. We don't pay anything for the pieces we publish, but we also don't, we haven't taken a penny from any, there have been no proceeds. We don't have advertising and any other way of monetizing this, but the idea of trying to divide any royalties among 100 contributors would have just been too monumental. And you did ask how the website got created and how we put the word out. And Sharon has much better kind of visual taste than I do. So she worked with her daughter Kate and son-in-law Chris on designing a website, and I just compiled a large list of potential contributors, friends, family, professional writers, non-writers, and just put the word out. And we also, we created a Facebook page and an Instagram page, and it just gained momentum.
And it just kept building. Oh, I mean, through the years, when you talk about it being kind of a 5-year process until publication, the big thing I wonder is when you started out, and Sharon said, let's give it a year. Was there an idea at the beginning that maybe eventually we'll turn this into a book if it takes off? Or was that not even on the radar?
No, I don't think it was really on the radar. I mean, we both have done books, we've done collections before, we've done, anthologies, but this just didn't seem like, this was just what it was. Now that I see it in book form, it's like, well, of course,
Right.
naturally, because it's just such nice bite-size, bits of memoir. It's just delightful. I mean, I think it's delightful. And I just want to say that we, in terms of getting contributors, if somebody would say something to us about, something they liked, this kitchen knife, that I'm using, it was my mother's, da 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 da. And we'd say, well, you ought to write about it for Storied Stuff. And it's surprising how many people said, maybe I will. And because part of our idea too was how many things in your home have meaning to you that no one else knows. And, your children, perhaps, maybe you'd like them to know that this wooden spoon was your grandmother's, not that they're going to keep it or treasure it any more than you do, but it might be nice to tell that story. So that was part of it too.
Right. Such an organic approach to storytelling, but just the what I find the most beautiful, and I really didn't realize this, and I've been watching you and following you, and I take, I do workshops with you both, and I've admired you and all of the work that you do collaboratively, as well as your own independent work. Steve is primarily a nonfiction writer of how many books now, Steve? Who knows?
20, 25.
20 something. And
Yeah.
Sharon is a fiction writer, as well as essayist, let me just say. But I mean, your mysteries are incredible, and they have the word stuff in them, which I just love the tie-in with that. So I've seen the two of you working, collaborating on so many things together, and what I just am taken by is I really didn't realize until this came out that you weren't. The idea was to open doors for writers and just to give people, something tangible to start with, especially for those. And when I started writing, I was looking to be anointed as a writer. I felt like I was an imposter, and I started taking classes of yours, hoping to rise to the level of official writer. And I remember getting permission from the two of you, that if you're drawn to writing, if you turn to the page, you're a writer. And this book is sort of like a tangible way for people to feel this validation of, you give them a concept, something familiar, like an object that they're very familiar with, and just to write about that versus what the heck am I going to write about? It's just so beautifully done. And then the tie-in with donating any of the proceeds to victims of the LA fires is, I mean, Sharon, like you said, it just all makes perfect sense now. But the original idea of it was really born from a time of kind of quiet desperation to connect, which,
Exactly.
and I just have to add too, and I'm reminded that like when my kids were little, I would often go over to their friends' homes to drop them off and pick them up, and I would get to see the stuff in people's houses. And then as adults, and as my kids have gotten older, you don't go into other people's homes as much and get to see their stuff. And so
Right.
This is just such a it just feels like a gap that's been in my life. To read through this stuff, it's just a little window, and you can really get so much into a story in 500 words.
Absolutely.
It doesn't sound like a lot, but it really can do a ton, leave an impact.
If we'd have just said, send us an essay of 500 words, and maybe we'll publish it if it's well done. I think a lot of the people, particularly the people who didn't have a lot of writing experience before, wouldn't have even attempted to do anything. But when you give an assignment, and you know from our workshops, Christine, that we often gave prompts. And like Farnsworth went to the drugstore, and write 250 words about that. And two of our writers, Judy and Bill, both took the Farnsworth character, who was the subject of several of our prompts. Farnsworth drove into the cemetery, or Farnsworth looked in the mirror. They both used that as departures to write novels. So prompts are a really good way to get yourself to sit down and be focused and start writing.
So thank you for explaining the process of all that, and just the impetus and then the evolution of this book. And can I ask, either one of you jump in, what is it like to work on multiple literary projects with your partner? What advice might you give to somebody? And I'm asking this for personal reasons, because I'm getting married next month, and my fiance and I are thinking about writing editing a book of essays about second chances, because this is a second marriage for both of us.
Yes.
And so, as I often do, I look to you two as models of how to do things, but I tried to just put a couple of the anthologies that you two have put out, and it's not everything. I have Body and Home. You've done, I think you did one that was community as well. Forgive me.
Family.
I knew it was community related. So
we did one called 50 Ways to Help Your Community, which were, grassroots ideas for solving problems in your community. We did that together.
Yeah. So you've done this multiple times, and what have you learned from doing anthologies together? Which strengths do each of you bring to it, and what's the fun part and what's the hard part? And what advice do you have for anybody who wants to put an anthology together?
You see us on separate screens here?
That's my fault, because I couldn't figure out how to do the live stream.
Two offices.
That's how we work. Okay. I'm in one room and Sharon's in the other. If I can start, I would say that I'm generally the engine driver here, the idea person. Mm-hmm. And Sharon is basically, give me an assignment and I will run with it. Mm-hmm. But Sharon doesn't like writer beware that there are a lot of, particularly in putting together a collection or an anthology, there are lots of moving parts. You've got to wrangle all the contributors. Same thing with storied stuff. Mm-hmm. You've got to, you've got to interface with a publisher or public or potential readers to do all that stuff. And Sharon, I think, would be the first to admit that that's not her thing. She doesn't want to be doing that. But so with the three books that you mentioned, Body, Family, and Home, mm-hmm. those are each collections of original essays by some of America's top writers: Jane Smiley, Alex Kotlowitz, Linda Berry, Mona Simpson, Hugh Danticott, and so forth. And so we had to, get all those people. We had to get them to sign contracts, and so forth. We had to make sure they got their stuff in on time because we had a publisher's deadline. That's me. But in the instance of these three, Sharon did all the editing of their pieces, and Sharon can explain to you that in those instances, because they were professional, honored, highly decorated writers, that it's a little more daunting to edit them than a Storied Stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, you're not going to tell Jane Smiley that perhaps she would like to show, not tell. You know, it's a little different. You know, it's a little different. You approach from a different place, and but the writers, what I learned in doing that is, I learned that the more professional and experienced the writer, the more they appreciate an editor. It was the writers who were a little bit more at the beginning places in their careers, who were, you know, a little like, I'm not sure I want to lose that sentence. You know, Jane Smiley was like, I'll take it. Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. And it was much more like, take that, take that, take that. I want to keep that, take that. There was not a personal attachment. It was more like, yeah, I can see that, but let me tell you why I did this.
Yeah, there was
And then, you know, so I learned just as much as they, you know, they didn't learn from me. But I mean, they, you know, it was a really a place of mutual respect, because they didn't know that I was nervous. And I did have the name, you know, I had the title editor, and Steve and I had the title editor. So they don't know that we're just like so excited, you know, and so a novice, you know, to have these people in our book. But so it was a little daunting. And as Steve says, if he gives me an assignment, if he says we need an introduction to this book, I'll go off and write that. I like writing to assignment. I always have, and I still do. And I write the introductions to most of the work we do together. Not all of it, but most of the work we do together, because that's more my strength. My strength is not reviewing a contract or contacting an agent. I mean, that is not, if I have to do it, I would do it, but Steve is a pro. So, you know, he's the one who needs to do that.
Can I say something, Christine? I think the idea of your second chances collection is terrific. And I know you do a lot of memoir coaching and working with writers. And as you noted, the subtitle of our book is Show and Tell for Grown-Ups. And one thing that I think Sharon and I both have kind of learned over the years, that with respect to putting some of these collections together, particularly the one we're talking about today, and in memoirs, Second Chances is a great title. The question then becomes, what's the subtitle? Because the subtitle, in a very few words, is what explains the book to the person who picks it up in the bookstore, or to an editor or a publishing house who you might be able to. So in the case of my own memoir, which has a very kind of clever and title, 3/4, 2 dimes, and a nickel. Okay, what is that? And then so it's a memoir of becoming whole. And so that I think it's helpful to the public, but it's also almost essential to the memoirist or the person putting the collection together, because it tells you, what is this really about? It's not your cleverness or just ability to describe a title. It's your ability to figure out what you're saying, what journey you're taking your reader on.
And that specificity is really important, not only for the reader. I hear the two of you saying it's going to be essential also for the editors and the writers to narrow down their focus, so that we're not receiving, submissions that are, second chances on losing everything in a gambling debt and starting over financially, right? Just like, making sure that it's about in love or relationships or some after loss, something
But Christine, you'll still get those submissions. You be specific, but I promise you, I edited a fiction magazine for several years, and it was only fiction, it was only prose, it was only short stories. And, every 2 weeks we got some poetry, and we would politely say, we don't do poetry, but, people just hope that they can break that mold. So just, be prepared.
I'll give you another example. We are very specific about saying this is about cherished keepsakes for storage stuff, objects. Well, I got one the other day about hearing loss, which is fine, but it's not. And you could make the argument, well, my hearing was cherished, of course, but it's not really an object. So when you send me an essay about losing your hearing and take an image off the internet of a firecracker because that's how you lost your hearing, it might be a lovely essay, but it's just not the right essay for us. And I think that's a lesson that all writers should learn from the beginning, that, look at, and agents, agents have requirements on their websites usually for how they like submissions, publishing houses and so forth. And I think they get so many these days that if you don't demonstrate to them that you can adhere to those requirements, they really don't want to deal with you.
Absolutely. They are just so bombarded these days. And so following their submissions guidelines is critical. And speaking of submissions guidelines, before we end, for anybody who wants to submit, with fingers crossed, for, to the website itself, which I'm assuming submissions are still open and you're taking essays, and then you've got this volume 2 of Storied Stuff coming out, sounds like in October-ish. People can go to the website, storied-stuff.com, and check out your submissions guidelines. And then, how soon after somebody submits, if it's accepted, how soon do things go up? Does that depend?
It depends. We do try and put priority on first-time contributors. So I might move a first-time contributor ahead of someone in the queue who's already published 3 or 4 stories on Storied Stuff. There is a submissions
tab or some
there, and I would say 3/4 of the people who submit, while their essays meet our kind of content requirements, they don't follow the single space docx and so forth, and we appreciate it if they do. But ordinarily, I would say within 3 months at the longest, that someone. So there's pretty much instant gratification. And if you go to storied-stuff.com, in addition to seeing the submission guidelines on that homepage, you'll see a link to how you can purchase Storied Stuff Volume 1 and a short video of our most recent appearance on television discussing the book, but also the submissions guidelines. And we'd love to have new contributors. And I know you've built a community with your Substack effort, which is great. And so anyone that is in this community, please.
Fantastic. Oh, that's just an exciting opportunity for people who are just chomping and either in the submissions process right now with their memoirs out. I get a lot of clients, but also readers of my Substack. I really encourage you to just try it out. 500 words ends up being about 2 full double-spaced pages of writing. Yeah? Am I doing the math right?
Yeah, and it can be We started out asking for 250 or less.
Ah,
People were able to meet that guideline, but there were people that were going over that, and so we're up to 500 and
mhm.
happy to take those.
So if it's under 500, that's fine too, as long as it's not over 500.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
And a photo attached with it. Ah, thank you. I'm going to put the book up one more time, and I hope everybody gets it because it is just such a unique, beautiful, digestible. I'm going to be going on vacation tomorrow, and I'm going to be bringing it along with me. And I'm just, you can open any page and just find a story, pick a picture that speaks to you, and read about what the story is behind it. It's just lovely. The two of you, you have changed my life in the way that you model partnership and literary community building. So thank you for being on my first. I don't even know if this is showing up somewhere. I really hope it is, but I'll put the recording up for anybody who's watching this later. Thank you for watching it, and really just check out Steve and Sharon's work because there's a lot of it, and it's worth your time. And Steve and Sharon, thank you for being part of this experiment that I've just tried. It's wonderful to do it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christine.
We encourage your folks to get volume 1 and stay tuned for volume 2, which Christine will be in.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Well, take care, everybody. Thanks for joining. And thank you again, Steve and Sharon.
Okay, thank you, Christine.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah,